Hey y'all, this is Pastor Brian of Haymarket Church. Today is Thursday, what day is it? Thursday the 17th of October. You ever feel like you don't know what day it is? Thursday the 17th of October, 2024, and this is our weekly midweek video. We talk about faith, life, something that's going on in the world. Today we're talking about Scripture. We are continuing our slow journey through the Gospel according to St. Mark. We are in chapter 14. Remember where we were. Jesus has finished the Last Supper. He has gone with his disciples, with 11 of them. Judas has left them to betray him. He has gone with his disciples to pray in the garden, and he's tried to get his disciples to stay awake with him, and they can't. They keep falling asleep, even though they said they'd be willing to die for him. They can't even stay awake for him. And so Jesus is praying that the cup would pass from him, that he wouldn't have to do what is coming up, but he says, "Not my will, but yours be done," to God the Father. And then he warns his disciples, "Hey, you guys can stay up with me. It's about to get worse. Look, here comes my betrayer." And that's where we begin in chapter 14, verse 43. Suddenly, while Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, came with a mob carrying swords and clubs. They had been sent by the chief priests, legal experts, and elders. His betrayer had given them a sign: "Arrest the man I kiss and take him away under guard." As soon as he got there, Judas said to Jesus, "Rabbi!" Then he kissed him. Then they came and grabbed Jesus and arrested him. One of the bystanders drew a sword and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his ear. Jesus responded, "Have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me like an outlaw? Day after day I was with you teaching in the temple, but you did not arrest me, but let the scriptures be fulfilled." And all his disciples left him and ran away. One young man, a disciple, was wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They grabbed him, but he left the linen cloth behind and ran away naked. So one of the things that's interesting about this passage is things that get left out. So let's start at the beginning. Jesus, right, is speaking to his disciples. Judas shows up with a mob to arrest him, and he gives this signal. I'm going to go so that it's easy. I guess I'm not entirely clear why the signal is needed, but he does it. I'm going to go kiss the one who you're supposed to arrest. So he gives him a kiss on the cheek, which is a sign of love and welcome in their culture. It's something friends do. And so it's worth noting Judas turns a sign of friendship into a thing that will lead to his friend's death. Often Judas gets demonized, but, I think part of the story of Judas is to say all of us are people who betray Jesus, even the people who are in theory the best, right? He's one of Jesus' inner circle, one of the 12. The 12 were a symbolic group in many ways, meant to symbolize the restoration of the people of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel become the 12 disciples. Excuse me. And Judas, one of the innermost people, one of the most important people in this movement, betrays Jesus to his death, right? All of us are capable of turning our backs on what is right, on selling out Jesus, on choosing sin over faithfulness, choosing selfishness over mercy and love. So that's significant. It's an important thing to know and to see here. So this is not about how bad Judas is. It is about how easy it is to fall into injustice and hatred and doing not what's right. So he kisses him and turns a sign of friendship. Right? I mean, how heartbreaking is that moment? Right? Like one of your closest friends. It might be like someone coming up and giving you a hug, and then the cops come and get you, right? Right, that's the sign. It's heartbreaking. So this innocent man is betrayed with a sign of love and friendship. And then they come and they arrest him. And then a bystander draws the sword and strikes the high priest's servant and cuts off his ear. What's interesting here is that in other Gospels, where we get the detail that Jesus tells them to stop with the violence, trying to defend him, right? He's like, "Stop that. This is not what we're doing here. We're not fighting back. I came not to," Jesus' kingdom is not won by violence. It is won by, it's not won by him executing violence. It's won by him receiving violence and then transforming it through the resurrection. Christ is the one who brings us peace by the way of peace. Violence cannot get us to victory in Jesus Christ. But that's not mentioned here. And it's, I think, worth noting the differences in the Gospels, right? Mark, again, we often talk about this. Mark is the most laser focused. It's like, hey, I got to get you where I'm going. There's a lot of stories that have less detail in Mark that are expanded upon by the other gospel writers. So the other gospel writers include this moment where Jesus tells us not to fight back with a sword, which is a real important lesson for Christians. For the first 200-300 years of Christianity, Christians would not serve in the military because they took that command so seriously. We will not take up the sword because Jesus told us not to. We figure that out in different ways today, and I do think there are pathways for folks to serve in the military and be faithful, but it is a challenge to figure that out, because the kind of the literal reading of the words of Jesus are to put away the sword and to choose peace over violence. So it is simply an interesting thing that that's omitted here. Also, in other accounts of the story, Jesus heals the ear of the high priest's servant, right? Or slave, it says here. That word slave, servant, doulos in Greek, can mean slave or servant. It's sometimes translated differently. Probably was a slave, not quite the same as like American chattel slavery, which is probably the worst form of slavery to exist in human history. We Americans had the worst form of slavery in human history because it was perpetual and race-based in ways that other forms weren't, but also like it was slavery in the ancient world and it was still really bad. But there was no understanding of any possible economic system without it, which is not a testament to them. We human beings have been a mess for a long time. But so slave or servant, depending on the translation here. But Jesus heals him in other versions of the story. And it doesn't happen in Mark, right? So again, because Mark is trying to get us to the end, but it is interesting. Another interesting thing to think about that happens in this, in this encounter, Jesus, even as he is going to his death, is in the business of healing, right? As in one of the other Gospels, when he's on the cross, he offers forgiveness to one of the thieves, who is one of the thieves who was crucified along with him, and says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." He prays that God would forgive the people who are killing him. So Jesus, even as he is, approaching the end, this cup that he wished would pass, that he prayed to God would pass for him, this way of faithfulness that he doesn't want to walk, even in the midst of that, he is offering healing, he's offering grace, right? Even at the worst, Jesus offers us his very best. But he says, day after day, I was with you, leading, teaching in the temple, but you did not arrest me, right? He's indicating like, this is sneaky. This is conniving. This is, right? The powers of darkness don't perform their darkness in broad daylight. When we choose to do what is evil, we often know it and hide it. When we choose to do what is not on the up and up, we sneak around and do it, right? If you have to sneak around and do it, then maybe it's something you shouldn't be doing, right? There's a space for privacy, and there's a space for things that are, private, and that's great and good and beautiful. But it's one of the things like we talk about with our children sometimes, the difference between like things, privacy that we want to respect, and secrets that need to be kept. And secrets are dangerous generally. Privacy or confidentiality, those things are not dangerous. It's just respect for a situation. Someone shares with me something that's very personal, that could, be embarrassing if it got out, or that's very hurtful, or that, is a thing that they're wrestling with, but they don't want the whole world to know. Like, that's confidentiality. But if someone says, hey, look, I'm going to do this thing, what is the difference, right? And so these folks seek, like, I don't know. I wonder what evil or what things we do that are like this, where we wouldn't dare do it in the light of day, but we do it when we hope that no one's looking, or, so this conspiracy to kill Jesus, right? We think, I don't know. He was in the temple teaching that day. Why didn't they come after him then? Because they knew, in some way, at least, if they didn't know it was wrong, they at least knew it was going to be unpopular. And so there's a calling in that to evaluate our behavior and our actions, and to ask, how are we doing the same? How are we trying to get away with things we know we shouldn't be doing? And then we get to the end, or the disciples run away, right? The ones who've said they'll stay with him to the end, they'll fight with him to the death. Once he gets arrested, they go, oh gosh. Right? They were willing to be heroes and maybe martyrs in that way, maybe, or at least they thought they were. but they aren't willing to suffer with him and walk with him to the cross, which doesn't make them bad, it makes them human. But our faithfulness wavers and Jesus's never does. And that is a significant lesson here. We think we're great, and sometimes we overinflate ourselves. We have an overinflated view of self. We think we can save ourselves. We cannot. Only Jesus can save us. We will all fall away at some point. Only Jesus remains faithful always. And then there's this moment, I think it's struck scholars and folks reading this, disciples of all kinds, as interesting for 2 millennia. One young man, a disciple, was wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They grabbed him, but he left the linen cloth behind and ran away naked. There's a couple things happening here there's later a young man in a linen cloth who announces the resurrection, a young man who is called a young man who we kind of tend to interpret as an angel. That happens at the tomb. And he announces the resurrection. And in Mark, the people he announces it to, the disciples, run away terrified. And so it's thought that maybe this is a hint towards that. There's a young man who runs away and then a young man who is faithful. There's some kind of literary stuff going on there, potentially. It's also, I think, meant to highlight the ridiculousness of this moment, right? Like, they're so terrified, they're not even waiting to grab their clothes. It's just, we got to get out of here. I'll run away naked if I have to, because I've got to get away. These people who said they'd be faithful to Jesus till the end are giving it all up to get away. So this is a dark moment in the story. This is, it's not the end. It's maybe not even the deepest point, but it's the beginning of the depths of Christ's abandonment. I guess, his abandonment begins earlier, right? We see him being abandoned and in little bits all the way. I mean, when they can't stay awake for the prayer, that's in a sense they're beginning to abandon him and beginning to abandon their commitments to him. But Jesus is abandoned. He is alone. He is on his own, and yet he remains faithful. That's the story. And the good news in that is that his faithfulness to the end is a reminder that God in Jesus Christ never gives up on us. God will go all the way to the gates of hell, to the darkness of death, to be with us and save us. Therefore, we know we are never alone, and that no matter what, God is in the business of rescuing us. That's good news, and I hope it's helpful. We'll continue this coming weeks. Peace. Have a great day.